Hello and welcome to A Teacher's Journey. I am Myrna and today I will summarize chapter 20 in the Oxford Handbook of Applied Linguistics by Robert B. Kaplan. The chapter is called Bilingual Education and it was written by Colin Baker. It's important to point out that this summary includes what I believe are the key points, so please don't depend on this video if you want to know everything happening in that chapter, and make sure to read the entire chapter yourself. The introduction talks about bilingual education, and it says that it does not just revolve around education and bilingualism or the use of two languages in the classroom. Rather, it includes other fields like economics, philosophy, history, sociolinguistics, politics, and language planning. An example for this is bilingual education is a means of language planning that plays so many roles in integrating or involving immigrant minorities, integrating newcomers or minority groups, language revitalization, and language preservation. Politics is rarely ever absent from debates about bilingual education. In fact, politics is considered to be the driving force behind bilingual education. It is hard to understand international bilingual education without contextualizing it within the history and politics of countries like the US or a region like Wales or a state like New York, Arizona, or California. Bilingual education as language planning. Language planners believe that bilingual education is essential for language maintenance, language revitalization, and reversing language shift. According to language planners, for a language to survive, it needs to be used daily with a favorable attitude. And when it comes to language planning, it's important to plan for reproduction and usage, as it's possible for languages to have many support systems, but languages might still die if they are not used in families and communities. An example for this is how minority language might be in danger if it's being used in law, with radio and television, web pages, computer programs, yet everyone uses the majority language at home when experiencing the mass media in leisure, in religious activities, in employment, and all daily social interactions. This means that mass media, signposts, and many other strategies and actions are not of first order important, although they contribute to four priorities, which are language acquisition in the family, language learning from preschool education through formal language to adult education, using minority language for economic purposes, social, cultural, and leisure participation through the minority language. Minority languages get in danger when families fail to make their children speak those languages. It also happens when a higher proportion of older speakers speak the minority language more than younger age groups. But when younger age groups speak the minority language more than older speakers, it's a positive sign for the future of this language. This is why family language planning is important. However, it is not enough by itself. For language planning to be successful, language learning in schools is important to compensate for any shortfall in language transmission at the family level and to increase the number of minority language speakers. Language planning through bilingual education has succeeded in countries like Canada, Catalonia, and Wales, and is considered to be important but insufficient foundation for language revitalization. An example for this is the case of Ireland, where the creation of the Irish Free State made Irish the first official language of the country, and Irish was made compulsory in school, compulsory to pass as a subject in order to graduate, compulsory for entrance to multi-sector employment and to university. However, the Irish language declined in daily use. One reason for the decline of Irish language is the lack of a strong economic dimension to Irish. When people found out that there is no real value for Irish in most of the employment markets, and they became aware of the economic advantages of European Union languages like French, German, Spanish, and English, Irish became irrelevant to them. So the economic value of a language is not the only determinant of its value, but it is a crucial factor. The more a minority language is tied with employment, promotion, employment, and increasing affluence, the greater the perceived value and status of that language gets, the greater the number of jobs that require bilingualism, and the more importance this language will have in the curriculum. According to this, the economic value of a minority language acts as a motivation for children to become proficient in that language at school. The more a minority language is tied with employment and the economy, the more parents may become motivated and encouraged to reproduce that language among their children. A strong economic value adds momentum for language reproduction in the family and to preschool efforts for language acquisition. The danger of only promoting the economic value of a minority language is that it might be temporary. Means once economic motives are fulfilled, a minority language may not be used anymore, and this is why a minority language needs to be used in certain domains in order to be used daily. For a language to survive and multiply, it has to be used regularly in everyday interactions and relationships, in other aspects of the cultural leisure and community life. All forms of cultural participation need to be encouraged, starting from rites and rituals of religion to the rhythms of rock music, and this will encourage language reproduction in the family itself. Literacy in a minority language is also important for that language to live and survive, and that's why any language lacking literacy may be in grave danger of dying rather than surviving. Literacy in a minority language gives many more uses and functions to that language, making it more important. A language planner's view of bilingual education focuses on the importance of producing more speakers of minority language than are generated through parents at home, and strengthening the minority language among first language speakers and other speakers as a second language as early as possible. Making children more fluent in the minority language as to operate in the curriculum of the primary and secondary school, and making the minority language culture permeate throughout the formal and hidden curriculum. Limitation of the language planning perspective of bilingual education. There is a great danger in regarding bilingual education as for the sake of the language, not for the sake of the child, and that is why bilingual education needs to be based on its value and contribution to the development of the child rather than the language. Language planning perspective on bilingual education tends to have limited view of the functions and purposes of education. Language planners expect way too much from bilingual education in revitalizing language, while in fact bilingual education cannot deliver language maintenance all by itself. Bilingual education as pedagogy. Bilingual education is superior to monolingual education in achievement across the curriculum, raising the self-esteem of language minority children, and producing bilingualism, biliteracy, and interculturalism. Educationalists have increasingly considered the value of 2 or 3 majority languages, not just taught as languages, but used to transmit curriculum content. Their arguments about bilingual education tend to revolve around 8 advantages, and they are: 1. Bilingual education allows 2 or more languages to develop fully. Instead of engaging in 2 second language learning, both or sometimes 3 languages are well developed, and this will allow children to engage in wider communications. Bilingual education gives children a wider and more sympathetic view of different creeds and cultures. So instead of token multicultural lessons, bilingual education gives deep insights into the cultures associated with languages, which give them a broader understanding of differences across cultures and prevent stereotyping of different social groups. Bilingual education often generates biliteracy, which allows more possibilities in use of literacy, like, for example, in employment. When children have two well-developed languages, they enjoy certain cognitive benefits like creativity and thinking, for example. Children's self-esteem may be raised when the home language is used in school. Then children may feel that they are accepted, since usually the minority language is usually replaced by the majority language in many communities. Curriculum achievement is increased through such education. It is a complex equation that includes the children feeling accepted and secure, and the relationship between language and cognitive development. The role of bilingual education in establishing the security of identity at local, regional, and national level may be important, as it is a psychological need for both children and grown-ups. The economic advantages of bilingual education are increasingly being claimed. This particularly happens in jobs that require a customer interference and communication with bilinguals or multilinguals. Bilingual education thus is seen as delivering relatively more marketable employees than monolingual education. Although bilingual education worldwide had a big number of supporters, there are limitations in the pedagogical view of bilingual education, for example. Bilingual education leads to a rising of standards, to more effective outcomes, and to a more child-centered education. In reality, however, bilingual education is only one ingredient among many that interact in a complex way to make schooling more or less effective. The type and use of language learned at school is another limitation, since the language of formal education does not necessarily prepare children for language use outside school. The languages of the curriculum is often complex and specialized, and the vernacular language of the street may be different. Language learning may stop at school gates, as children may switch into the majority language when they leave school by the end of the day, and this would make the minority language the language of content delivery of the curriculum, but not of peer culture. Bilingual education as politics. There are always expressions of political ideology, tires of political change, and political initiatives behind bilingual education. Behind what might be posed as conservation of threatened languages of the world lie other more basic political ideologies. There are usually political debates surrounding bilingual education, like, for example, debates about national identity, dominance and control by elites in power relationships among politicians and civil servants, and questions about social order and social cohesion. Cummins argued that research on bilingual education has become so unfocused, it has sent out so many mixed signals, and is so ignorant of the selective use of research to fit and support politician theories. The economic perspective on bilingual education. Dutcher examines international evidences from many countries like Haiti, Nigeria, and the United States, and she concludes that the development of the mother tongue is critical for cognitive development and as a foundation for learning the second language. The costs for bilingual education are nearly as the same as for traditional education, and bilingual education is not the expensive option. Developmental maintenance bilingual education creates cost saving for the education system for the society. So in this kind of bilingual education, students' progress is faster, and this higher achievement benefits society through less unemployment and more skilled workforce. In submersion and transitional bilingual education, national economy might be affected due to a slower rate of progress at school, which will lead to a lower level of final achievement and sometimes the need for special or compensatory education. Based on that, in this kind of bilingual education, there will be higher dropout rates, which means lower potential for markets, resulting in a lower level of skill among the workforce and higher unemployment rates. In economic terms, students need to gain productive characteristics through education, and Dutcher indicates that they are achieved through the early use of native language. Conclusion. Bilingual education does not only revolve around language maintenance and revitalization, but it is also affected by other educational, economic, cultural, and political factors. So this chapter suggested that there is usually a separation between those perspectives, but each could be enlightened and expanded by understanding the perspective of another. Well, that was it. Thank you for your time, and I hope this was useful to you at all. Here's a link to my Facebook account, so hit me up if you have any questions. This is Myrna Fathi, and this was One Step on a Teacher's Journey.